Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. We're going live again, and we have with us Ken Spiedel, who is Vice President at Gates Healthcare. And Ken and I have spoken a couple of times now because we were looking at working on a project together. But Ken, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Counselor. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you and your audience. That's fantastic. So hopefully we have folks on that will type in any questions and those type of things as you go through that. Well, I am Ken Spiedel. I am a pharmacist by undergraduate, in terms of my doctorate, in terms of pharmacy. So I've got my PharmD, so BS, as well as went on and got my PharmD. I've been blessed with an array of opportunities and practices and practice settings, and I just like a variety. I've done so much, and you talk acute care and community and home infusion and compounding and academia, and love it all. I probably the thing I haven't really done, and I've done it in a very indirect fashion, is the radionucleotides and those type of things. So I'll call it the nukes things, but I've placed students in those settings and observed those settings, but I've just been blessed. So I am a vice president of compounding compliance with Gates Healthcare Associates. It's a wonderful company to work with. It's a great team that we have together. So we've got a whole consortium of people with different expertises, and we work a lot on the regulatory sides of things, and clinical support and technical support and those type of things. So it's a wonderful opportunity. Background wise, just quickly, I come from, I guess my beginnings, or I guess my really early beginnings, community pharmacy, because my father was a community pharmacy and a pharmacist, and multiple locations. So I'll just call myself a snotty little nosed kid, just kind of running around, kind of helping dad out in a variety of different things and watching what he did and then things. And that kind of spawned my interest into pharmacy. And then from there, really liked the clinical aspect and the acute care. So I did acute care, loved that. But then just, wanted to tie in some community roots. So did that as well, and kind of did multiple things. And then from there, then went into home infusion, associated with a hospital affiliated home infusion group, and set that up. I actually set up my own home infusion when home infusion really wasn't even known. Set out the first TPN patient in my community for home TPN, and that was a whole learning process and whatever, and it was a very positive outcome. And then that kind of spawned. It was beautiful because I'd say it melded the clinical as well as the pharmaceutical. So the aseptic techniques and the whole thing. I remember purchasing an aseptic hood and validating, because I did that in the hospital a lot, but then taking it into the community, having to do that. So it was really interesting, monitoring her labs, which really was my forte, and then getting more patients and all that. So starting that whole world, and then developing that for a health system affiliated program, and running that for quite a while. Then that morphed, and they say, hey, you can do sterile, can you do non-sterile stuff? So I said, well, sure. So I always loved pharmaceutics and pharmaceutical technology, and kind of took that and kind of developed that. And from then got into academia and compounding, and I had my own compounding lab. And academia yelled out and said, hey, can you teach us? I'd love to teach, and still do, and was on faculty there for at University of Findlay in Ohio, and taught there for many years. And then I now teach on behalf of multiple companies, and commissioned to teach on a variety of different topics, and love doing that. I really love the teaching. Like to see the kind of deer in the headlights kind of look, and it's like, oh my gosh, kind of thing. And then the whole kind of, then their jaw comes out. So it's like, and then they have physicians. I teach a lot of physicians and practitioners now, and it's really, really neat to be able to I guess I'll be selfish, Darshan, is as you know, teaching, one person is wonderful because exponentially you can affect patient care,
Yeah.
to the number of patients they see. And then,
Yeah.
but you got a room of, 40, 50 people,
Yeah.
you can influence patient care. You hope you do. I get feedback and they say, thank you for what you did. I just, it worked. I was just doing a conference, a national, international conference, and somebody said, Dr. Spiedel, you recommended this. I just want to let you know, and it was in front of all these people. I just want to let you know it worked unbelievably, kind of thing. And patients doing well. And then, it wasn't my show,
Yeah.
but the fact of the matter is they were just acknowledging the fact that, they absorbed that, and then they took the principle even further than I even suggested. So it's a wonderful world to do. So teaching, love that. The compliance thing, which is big, as you well know, counselor, in regards to being compliant with all of the regulations, the pending regulations, and the proposed regulations, and the compliance guidance and various things like that, and how all that just gets in there. So I like trying to take some of the complexity out, and I know that's your forte. Taking the complexity out, working with clients and working with professionals. And we're talking about physicians, veterinarians, we're talking about pharmacies, facilities, and trying to get the facilities compliant. So it's great. That's great. So that's kind of me. I've been blessed. I've been the president of the National Home Infusion Association. I've been president of hospices, working because that's near and dear to my heart for personal reasons, and just love trying to make a difference. So, and that's what we do as healthcare professionals.
That's right. So here's a question for you that we had a little pre-conference to talk about things, but I'm going to already veer off. So here's my first question. You talked about starting out in community pharmacy.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone talks about how community pharmacy is dead and that there's no way of succeeding. Knowing what you know now, knowing your own experiences in community pharmacy, knowing how you help a variety of independent owners of pharmacies, is that true? Are community pharmacies dead?
No, they're not dead, but the diversification is so necessary for them to do to figure out the other niches. I mean, obviously the big box people, they send it to the door in a box and all that stuff. But we are professionals in that service side of things, in that touching. And now you have pharmacists are going to be administering, and they already are, the COVID vaccine, administering other inoculations. And so the community in the world seeing now, I'm not saying the big box people aren't doing their inoculations as well and what have you, but to get it in and seeing the pharmacist and working with the pharmacist and the medication regimens that are out there are so complex, and to have them boil it down and work with them. And so that's what I work with the people. Now, I don't profess to be a community pharmacy specialist by any means, but in terms of working with them to help their diversification and help them on the clinical side. I mean, one of my specialties is on the endocrinology side of things and working with them. So if if a patient is on, I'll call it horsacillin. The horsacillin, it may be an extract that was derived from the urine of a pregnant mare, and that particular substance, may be causing an effect on the patients, and say, okay, can we complement that, increase the excretion of what we call the catechol-estrogens, and reduce the risks to them from some estrogen-related pathology or whatever. And here's how you can maybe augment that with a complementary cell in nutraceutical, those kind of things, and how you can change their lifestyle and all that. All those wonderful things, that's not going to happen in a big box. That's going to happen in I'll call it the little box, but some community pharmacy is quite large. And a lot of the compounding really came from the community pharmacy side of things. They said, hey, I got to diversify. I just can't keep sticking, pouring these things. I want to make sure that I can bridge that. And when I promote compounding is because it worked for me. You take the clinical component, you take the pharmaceutical sciences, and you put it in a blender, and you add a special sauce or two in there, and you blend it up, and you pour it, and you got this awesome smoothie. And when you're talking about compounding pharmacy, so
So what I hear you saying is there is an opportunity, but if you try to just be the next guy who's going to lick stick count pour, you're probably not going to make it. What you need to do is provide a special sauce, and the special sauce can be a variety of things, whether it's the COVID vaccination, whether it's compounding, or whether it's managing people who are doing all these different things from different modalities, and you helping them guide them. What are the more non-traditional ways you've seen compounding pharmacies sort of delve into other formats, if you will, in a way that supports the patient?
Great question. So one of the things I've seen is people specialize, it's a community pharmacy, but also have a subspecialty and say, we take care of your four-legged animals, and they work closely. And this is the important point. They work closely with veterinarians.
Yep.
Now, veterinarians always believe, and I've tried to change this paradigm at the university. I called it Camp David, the Accords. And I tried to, so I got the vets and the pharmacy people together, and the vets say, you're the people that are taking all our business and all our money away. You're the people. They think 1-800 blank blank, vet med, whatever, and those things. And they think, well, those are pharmacists taking that.
Yeah.
No, they're not. Generally, those are big conglomerates. One group are owned by a bunch of anesthesiologists, another group are owned by another. My point is, these pharmacies say, okay, I see that relationship with the vets, and I see this. And so they keep a subset, and I've seen this numerous times, a subset business, and say, we're gonna have toys for your animals here, specialty toys. We're gonna have specialty little foods and different things in here as well. But we're gonna take care and work with your vet very closely and be able to formulate things to help to pill the cat. No, we're actually going to create a paw paste, something you're going to put on a cat that's still doing hygiene, and they're going to put it on. The cat saying, I've got to get this off, and it just, the bioavailability is amazing because they want that off. And so work with the vet in the peenie of the ear and different things like that, and try to work that. So that's one niche. Obviously, the niche of nutraceuticals, to try to, from a consultation sense, and say, have somebody that's a nutritionist to say, let's work on this, and say, okay, here's these lines of nutraceuticals, because you probably know this, Darshan, and it's a good thing. The FDA is not overseeing the nutraceutical sides of things in terms of, hey, this comes up, but the claims, you got to watch the claims and those types of things. But the fact of the matter is done numerous examinations of these things in terms of the literature, as well as certificate analysis, as well as actually assays. You should see some of these things. There was one study looking at DHEA in the United States, and this was published, and they looked at 17 different formulations of DHEA, and 3 had 0. The average was about 82%, and one had 152% of DHEA. So trying to come up with ones that have, the proper. And so people take these, what I'll call the fur ball of nutraceuticals, and they just get this and get this and get this, and they just, I heard it was good, but the quality. And so I think these community pharmacies that specialize in that, and working with them and collaborate with functional medicine specialists and those type of things, it's a wonderful world. So anyway, they just have to think outside the box. And I'll tell you, there's some brilliant pharmacists and owners and entrepreneurs out there doing a fantastic job. So I think, NCPA and those, they always will award, pay attention to those people and how they're trying to diversify things.
So here's my question. You talk about working with nutritionists, you talk about working with physicians, you talk about working with vets. If I'm a community pharmacist and I'm going, okay, I'm open to this, are you suggesting that they walk into a vet's office or a nutritionist's office, or what's the best way for them to actually reach out to them?
So I think first of all, you have to understand the veterinarian patient. I've seen people. And my wife and I, we have animals, but I've seen people come into the vet's office or whatever, and they're, they don't want to sit down. They say, you got that smell that hits you, and then the barking and the meowing and all those things going on. And then, I remember there was years ago, I was quasi involved in it, but the representative that was the sales representative going out and seeing the vets hated animals. Animals can smell whether you hate them, and the people that love animals can actually see that you hate animals. So you got to love animals, and you have to understand the physiology of these animals and the pharmacology that approaches those. So if you go in there and say, hey, I can provide you with all the drugs, they'll probably throw you out head first, because they're going to, again, see you as competition, even though you're not. You have to approach it and say, I'm your problem solver. I'm going to help you. And here's some suggestions when you have maybe an elderly person that is just getting scratched up by the cat. I love the cat, but I got to give it this because, sometimes these cats get hyperthyroidism, and we need to kind of knock the thyroid levels down a little bit, but trying to pill it with methimazole or something like that isn't going to happen. And so how can we do that? And, teach the vets how we can do it, and how you can help them and augment and improve the safety of your patients, and on and on. But you have to be very careful, because they're going to see you as competition.
Right.
And you have to approach it as augmentation, not competition.
Okay.
You're here to augment. You're here to synergize. The 1 and 1 doesn't equal 2 anymore. It's going to equal 3 and 4. We're going to try to, work collectively. I'm not here to compete with you, but we can help. We can help promote your practice too. Where's your business cards? Give me some placards. Give me some things, because we have a lot of patients come in here. And so I think that whole kind of synergistic approach and collaboration, and whether it's a nutritionist as well. Say we got a nutritionist here, we got a functional medicine practitioner. You just have to kind of work your specialty. But then, while you appreciate, you have to maintain the Switzerland kind of thing. I'm an independent kind of country. I don't get involved with the crazy dictator over here or the passive country over here. I'm just kind of here, So you have to play that role. But obviously, there's so much out there, but it's tough. I mean, the margins of typical community pharmacy, and again, I'm not intimately involved in that, but it's crazy. And so the diversification to the service side of things, and we hope it will continue, and get provider numbers and all those kind of things. We hope that will continue.
So if that's true, and you're talking about these vet practices, and I know based on conversations you and I have had, you've actually helped with multi-state vet practices. In those situations, and you've actually done it recently. So I guess I have two questions. One is, if you're a community pharmacy and you're working with a vet practice, or if you're a vet practice who's multi-state, how do you deal with the challenges? What are the biggest challenges that you'd face, and how do you deal with them that you've sort of seen?
Unfortunately, as you well know, there's no homogenization of the regulations.
Yeah.
And I can't be a specialist in 50 plus states, and I'm not licensed in the 50 plus state, which would require me to be aware of all of their state regulations. So the federal regulations, they start crossing state borders in terms of, the provision of services, if you're a pharmacy providing services for those people, or the vet centers themselves. What really is driving my involvement in a lot of the interstate vet centers has to do with compliancy with the hazardous drug standards. If you've ever been in a practice, a vet practice, and you see the practices going on, sure, there's some great ones, there really is, and they've done a good job. But there's a lot of naivete that's going in there saying, well, we never had to do that before. Well, you have to do it, but because you're exposing, you should see the volumes of chemicals and things that their staff, the technicians, are being exposed to. And really the lack of consistency in regards to compliancy with the standards of practice. So when they realize by their vet boards that hey, by the way, this thing's called USP 800, and it's a hazardous drug thing, and you're going to have to be compliant with it, because it's not just for pharmacists only. And so they're realizing that, and so they say, well, we have to do some brick and mortar changes of our facility, or we're going to build another facility. How are we going to do this? So we work with them, all right? So you come and you do a baseline assessment. and you go there and say, okay, here's where you are here, and here's where you need to be.
Right.
So
Right.
there's a big gap here.
Right.
So we got to fill that gap, and it's just amazing. And I've never had a negative experience, but it's like I never knew we had to do that. And again, we can argue and say 800 is not in compliancy yet, but OSHA has been in compliancy in terms of hazardous drugs for years. Right. And so, the thing that you'll notice the difference is maybe you'll have the board of pharmacy or the board of veterinary medicine or the board of medicine if you're an oncologist or something like that, taking care of humans, or an oncologist taking care of animals. That's like, I never had to do this, but we've had OSHA will come into play usually when some person says I've been harmed by it, an employee has been harmed by it. And you don't want those boys and girls walking in there. So we have to understand there's been hazardous drug standards for, and you understand that it hazardous drug standards for years. So we need to be compliant now. Right. And it's just frankly good practice. I always tell people, and I just had this conversation. Somebody said, well, I'm going to do my hazardous drugs and my non-hazardous drugs in the same room. Mm-hmm. Oh, and I'm going to do my hazardous vet meds in the same room I'm doing my hazardous human and non-hazardous human in the same room. And it just so happened this particular one, there were several people on the call. One person just had a baby. I said, well, I hope this never happens, but you might have to compound something for your baby or somebody's baby or somebody's loved one. How do you feel about that, knowing there's cyclophosphamide right there? Right. Or some hazardous chemical, maybe a reproductive hazard, and so how do you feel about that with a new baby? Honestly, there was no pushback after that. I mean, it just, there was no pushback. You're right, we need a separate room. I said, yes, you do.
So I have a question from an individual who wrote in. If the FDA does not regulate these products in terms of safety, efficacy, and quality, how will patients be protected? So I guess the question really is, is this self-regulated? And if it's self-regulated, how do you protect patients?
Well, it's not self-regulated. I mean, and that's a lot of people's argument is in terms of, well, you've got a bunch of people that are out there going rogue here, and they're just kind of coming up with their own perspectives. And one thing I always, when I teach, I always create this distinction. First of all, we don't produce products. We produce preparations. And so I make that distinction because it's important to create that distinction for the regulators. So in terms of people that can potentially have exposure to these preparations, which essentially are products manufactured by FDA inspected, FDA approved labs, that are products that are monographed. Mm-hmm. That means the USP has monographed them and they're okay. Powders, bulk powders, those type, and then formulated into maybe a different delivery system, dosage form, something like that. We have, and we've had standards for many, many years called the United States Pharmacopoeia, which is a nonprofit organization that sets the standards of practice for pharmacy in a variety of different fields. And by the way, manufacturers use that as well and say, we've got our standard that they apply to certain standards in the compendia and all that. And well, we've got standards too. This is the world I love to try to influence because we have good people intending and doing the right thing based on the standards of practice. And one of the things I go around, frankly, the world, and I apply the practices and again, say, here's the standard of practice with acquisition of your chemical. Maybe you have a recitation responsibility for the person, for the company you're buying it for. So you have this standard and you say, okay, this chemical has to be this grade, this grade, this grade, this grade, and then here's how we qualify the vendor. And so you qualify the vendor. That's just that. And then the formulation process. How do we know it's quality? We can do external testing and all the So those kind of things are becoming more of the standard of practice. And sure, there's some naivete and there's some people that are learning, but true in medicine too, in physicians and veterinary medicine, people do things differently, but you just have to find their other higher quality. Now, I was very involved, and I helped write the original standards and actually construct the original Pharmacy Compounding Accreditation Board. Many years ago, I sat in a NABP board office in Chicago area, and we just hashed this whole thing out and constructed it. And I was I helped write the standards, and just a very small group of people. We wrote the initial standards, and I was on the initial standards committee, and then the ongoing standard committee could be doing better and better. But so I was one of their first surveyors that went out and assessed that. And so we have standards we have accrediting bodies, we have standards, we have those processes. We have state boards of pharmacy that have regulations on this. So I know it seems like the wild, wild west, but the fact of the matter is you got to find the people. And I know that's a challenge, but you have to find the people that do it right. And I would just ask the question, if you're going to go in and interview a compounding pharmacy or pharmacist and say, how do you know that if you had to take care of one of your loved ones, pharmacist, how do you know it's going to be the highest quality? Can you give me your answers? And then if you get a bunch of stuff, it's not making any sense or whatever, and it's not, just say, I want to know how you protect your loved ones. How are you going to protect mine?
So let me ask you a follow-up question to that, because that's actually another follow-up question we just got, which is, so far we've talked primarily about manufacturing, and we've talked or compounding, and the idea of how do you prevent adulteration and misbranding by adhering to USP standards. The question I just got is, well, that's great. How do you now look at safety and efficacy in those same products? And in the case of clinical research, you have what are called clinical research associates, who often audit your safety and efficacy trials. So is there such a thing in the context of compounding? And how do you address that?
Well, the point that I want to make, and I have made for many, many years, compounding is personalization. It's individualization. And when you're in the manufacturing and you're on the pharma side of things, you have to, sure, you do your phase 1, 2, 3, and then your follow-up phase 4. Sure. Post-marketing surveillance and all those kind of things. To try to take a drug to market, we all know that costs so many billions and millions of dollars to try to do that. It's cost prohibitive to do these studies and do them with the rigor that's necessary on the FDA side of things. We can't do that. But what we attempt to do in that regard is we try to take these known moieties, these known chemicals, and say, well, if the typical dose is orally, enterally, and it goes in the gastrointestinal tract and goes in the gut, goes and picks up in the liver and gets metabolized or whatever, okay, well, if it needs to be metabolized, then okay, maybe we can change the delivery system and avoid some issues in the gut and do it transmucosally, sublingual, change the route of delivery to try to benefit the patient personally. Personalization. Right. So no, we can't do those studies because it's cost prohibitive. That we can't have the model and sell that thing, and whatever that thing is, I'll call it gorillacillin or tigercillin or whatever we're talking. There's no such thing I'm aware of. I think there is. Somebody called me on that. There was a bertacillin. Really? Yeah, bertacillin. There's something. I did not know that. Yeah, but you take that moiety and you say, okay, I can't do phase 1, 2, and 3. But what I tell the compounders is they don't have to do this, is create your own outcomes and your own type of thing. 44-year-old female, post-herpetic neuralgia. We treated her topically with this combination, whatever. Not that we do pain analogs scores anymore per se, but she was able to go back to work. She was able to improve her practices. She was able to put on her clothing because every time a piece of clothing touched the area. So, you keep those things down. You say, here's an outcome, here's an outcome, here's an outcome. So we are collecting those outcomes. And we're trying to say, okay, we have positive, because there's patients that can't take the norm. There's patients that can't take the normal dose, the normal route, the normal delivery system. and those type of things. So it's very, very important that we understand how these things. So I know the argument has been from pharma, from the FDA, and from the naysayers that say this isn't FDA approved. Well, you know how many drugs actually aren't FDA approved? Thousands.
Right.
They're products. Morphine sulfate, potassium chloride. Those were before that they were grandfathered in. So we have all these drugs that are not necessarily FDA approved, but they're grandfathered in. And I'm not saying
there's a process there.
Yeah, there is.
Products, but
there is. But in terms of the argument I hear is FDA, these are not FDA approved. To try to get these, they don't approve a chemical, they approve a product. And these products haven't been submitted in, these are preparations. So you have to have the confidence in the people and in the regulations and the processes. This is not mass production here. We're not making one huge batch for many people.
Yeah.
That whole one-on-one means a lot to me, and that's what I promote to my clients.
So what this gentleman is pointing out is, so what you're really talking about is what's really cutting edge right now, which is using real-world evidence and using that real-world evidence to actually contribute towards, well, we have this evidence and this applies to this individual patient, and what is the implication of that? And you're never going to do a study on 3 patients because it's just statistically it's never going to work.
Absolutely.
And B, from a scientific perspective, it's never going to pass that muster. However, patients are still going to benefit from it because they still need the help. So what you're really talking about is providing for those individual patients. And that's not to say that you aren't going to start off with drugs that have not been whose safety and efficacy has not been previously tested. You're not starting off with brand new APIs that no one's ever looked at. However, to be fair, there does remain that the new indication and or the new dosage form and or the new dose may be different from what the FDA previously approved. However, that's exactly where the practice of medicine and the practice of pharmacy start. But I do have to say this was supposed to be a much shorter talk, but it sounds like you've gotten a lot of people really excited, really involved. I would love to have you come back and we do another talk. Do you have any, Ken, before we let off, any last words?
Well, I hope people can see through all of the blur and the fog and understand personalization of the treatment of patients is where it is. We've mapped the genome, whatever. Compounding pharmacy is a method, a portal to allow that to happen even better. Because it's not just about genetics and genomics. It has to do with skin condition. It has to do with enteral condition, short gut, whatever. We have these ways and means. So I hope people get as excited as I am about that personalization piece about it. So there's a lot of potential there.
Thank you again, Ken.
Thank you.